And as you noticed, it's going to be recorded today. I am Melissa Missy Watchke, and I am the chat person and helper for Alyssa. I'm so pleased to welcome you to Reimagining Consent Education poster session, introducing two tools for teaching consent. As a reminder, this is recorded, as we talked about, and they will be available 3 months following the conference. Um, Please use the engagement features. Remember to use the chat featured in Whova or ask questions. Per Alyssa's request, we're going to save questions to the end, so feel free to go onto that, onto the chat or the Q&A, and I'll pick it up and monitor. And with that, please remember to do the evaluation. Um, and with my pleasure, we're going to turn it right over to Alyssa because we have such a short amount of time. So thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you so much, Missy. Good morning, everyone, or happy time zone wherever you are. It's morning over for me on the West Coast. My name is Alyssa Ayon. I am an associate clinical social worker. Thank you so much for joining today's poster session. I'm happy to be here. This will be my first time presenting at Puzzles. I've been an attendee in the past, and I'm really happy to be here today presenting. I'll ask for your grace and your patience today as I'm still a little sick. So I might like go off camera just to blow my nose or if I feel a sneeze coming on or something. But yes, please give me some grace as I'm navigating this head cold right now. But I'm really happy to be here today. So we're going to be able to just jump right in since we're only around for 15 minutes. I'll just do a quick introduction. Like I said, my name is Alyssa. I use she, hers pronouns, and a little bit about my background. I've been working in the gender-based violence field for about 6 years now, and currently I work full-time at the UCLA Health Prevention Center of Excellence as a mental health facilitator, trainer, and curriculum developer. There, we really focus on creating a more trauma-informed LA County through presentations, building online courses, and I also work part-time at California State University Northridge, or CSUN, as a campus care advocate. And in this role, I am able to provide direct therapy services as a clinician. CSUN's really unique, and we're one of the only CSUs to have master's level advocates. So we're able to directly provide therapy services. And we also still engage in prevention, education, and outreach. So that's a little bit about my background, and we'll dive right into these two new tools. Oh, hold on. Okay. So the first one is the consent wheel, and on the next slide, I have it enlarged. So we'll go to this. But how I kind of had the idea for the consent wheel is you can see, might be really familiar to you, and it's very similar to the power and control wheel that is used to discuss the dynamics of domestic violence and how power and control is used in those relationships. So I created this consent wheel in my role at UCLA when I was partnering with the Santa Monica Rape Treatment Center. We were working on revamping their high school curriculum to prevent dating violence and sexual assault. So one of the things I kept in mind is we've seen a lot of acronyms when we're talking about consent, right? Like Planned Parenthood has fries. Right now, I'm struggling to think of all the other ones that we've seen, but I kind of wanted to pull together these core concepts that we've seen when talking about consent and put it in this familiar wheel that we've also seen in talking about domestic and dating violence. So, what this consent wheel is conveying is at the very center of the wheel, we have that affirmative yes, right? The heart of consent is giving permission, it's saying yes, aligning with that affirmative consent approach. Now, this different spokes of the wheel are some of those things that we've seen in our acronyms, right? A lot of these terms might be familiar to you. You may already be teaching consent in this way. So recognizing that consent is voluntary, meaning it's freely given. There is no pressure, no force, no kind of manipulation happening. Consent is, of course, revocable, meaning someone is able to change their mind at any time along the way. Consent is informed, meaning we have all the facts. We're able to make a decision based on our bodily autonomy, our choice, what we're comfortable with, our boundaries. And consent is also based on equal power. There is this equal power existing in the relationship where one person doesn't hold more power than the other. And this could be through age gaps, right? Through maybe employment. And it's not to label these relationships as inherently wrong or bad, but how are you communicating this with your partner so that if someone is maybe in a lower power dynamic, they're still feeling comfortable and able to say no or to say yes to certain things. And of course, consent is specific, meaning that it is another term for this has been ongoing. I really like the word specific in that we're not saying yes to one thing doesn't mean that we're saying yes to everything. And of course, consent is engaged. This means that the person is engaging because they want to, because it's mutual. They're able to make that choice and decision for themselves. And this has replaced the word enthusiastic for me. When I was talking with a colleague and kind of reviewing this wheel, we thought about how the term enthusiastic may not always apply, right? Like you can have sex that is bad. It's just not good sex, but it doesn't mean that it was necessarily harmful, right? Maybe someone isn't necessarily enthusiastically involved in it. They want to have sex, but they're not super enthusiastic. There could be a lot of reasons for that, right? Maybe they're not feeling well. Maybe they're engaging in consensual sex work. So we kind of took a look at that word enthusiastic and felt like I really liked that term engaged of they're engaging out of this voluntary choice. And I thought it was a little more inclusionary. So that kind of reviews the spokes of the wheel. And the outer circle represents ongoing respect and communication between the people engaging in any kind of sexual activity, right? And this doesn't just apply to people who are in a relationship with one another, but any kind of people engaging in sexual activity, there needs to be respect for the other person, right? We need to have respect for their bodily autonomy, their right to say yes or no. We need to respect their boundaries, their limits, what they're comfortable with, respecting their bodies. And how do we do this? How do we know what someone's boundaries are? How do we know what they're okay with? How do we know that this is voluntary for them, that it's informed? Well, we have to communicate this with each other, right? We have to look into verbal communication. How are we asking what they're okay with? Are we checking in on their body language, maybe noticing if they're pulling away, if they're looking really uncomfortable, maybe they're wincing, like something's hurting. So we're communicating throughout this process. And I think that's one of the things that we talk a lot about when we're teaching consent, but it's not always explicitly highlighted like on the screen, right? It's not always included like in an acronym or when we're presenting on this. So I thought having this wheel really conveys this is what needs to be happening and this is what pulls it all together, right? Having communication and respect for each other. And this doesn't just have to be between two partners, but anyone who's engaging in sexual activity. So I want to get into the next tool. This is the sexual hierarchy of needs. And this also might look familiar to you as it's based off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is emphasizing that this is taking the conversation beyond consent, right? Consent is the bare minimum when we're talking about engaging in sexual activity, right? This is something that just needs to exist. Anything without consent is inherently harmful, right? We're hurting someone if we're doing something against their consent. But having great sex, having good sex is so much more than just getting consent from somebody. right? There's so much more to this conversation. And here, when we're thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we know that the bottom is the foundation. So consent is our foundation in this pyramid. And on top of that pyramid, once we have consent, we know this exists. Let's now talk about what does safe sex mean for us, right? This is where we're thinking about contraception, birth control, maybe recent STI or STD screenings or testings, having these conversations with your partner. What makes you feel safe to engage in any of the sexual activities you're talking about? Is it wearing a condom? Is it maybe not engaging in oral sex, but in other kinds of sex? What does this look like? And these are also really important tools that we need to be giving students, young people, because when we're just telling folks, hey, make sure you get consent, that's great, right? We don't want to be harming people, but also that leaves so many questions for folks. Okay, I have consent, but how do I have good sex? How do I make sure that I'm pleasing my partner? What does that look like? How do I talk about this stuff? So this tool can really go hand in hand with the consent wheel because yes, so often we know that we need to talk about consent, right? We can't completely push that out the window. And if, there are also a lot of like legal and ethical reasons why we have to talk about affirmative consent on our campuses, right? We can't completely leave that out. But this tool can go hand in hand in saying, hey, look, we've talked about consent, but let's take it a step further. This is how consent fits into the bigger picture, right? Once we have this, now we talk about safe sex. And then that's how we get to the tip of the pyramid where now we can achieve and start talking about pleasurable sex. What does this look like? What things are you comfortable with? What are things that you're curious about? Maybe there's things that you haven't tried before, but you're a little nervous. How do you talk about this with your partner? Right? This is kind of putting the bigger picture and moving conversations beyond just here's how to not harm somebody, right? Young people need a lot more tools than that. And it's really interesting how in our society, sex is used so much to market things. We see it all the times in movies and media, and pornography and how sex is portrayed there. But at the same time, it's so taboo, right? We don't want to we get uncomfortable talking about sex and parents may feel uncomfortable talking about sex with their kids and what it means, what pleasure looks like. So I think that it's really important to start embracing and having these conversations with students, with young people, because we want to move beyond just, hey, of course, we don't want to harm people, but also we want to teach you to have sex that is actually enjoyable for you, right? The entire point of people having sex is because it feels good, because maybe they're craving intimacy, connection, right? That's really the underlying meaning of sex. It's more than just avoiding harm. So in our last couple minutes together, I have some reflection and feedback, and you can save these to consider later. You can kind of bring them up in the chat, but I'd love to hear what stood out to you about each tool. Are these tools that you would feel comfortable presenting? Are they easily presentable? If not, what kind of changes would you make? How might they be useful in your work? And what questions do you still have? I've been working with these tools. This is my first school year, so from August, using these new tools. And I've been presenting them at Greek presentations, different club presentations, even to faculty and departments. And so far, I've gotten a lot of great feedback on the ability to understand these tools, what they're representing. So now I'd really love to just open it up. I'll be kind of eyeing the chat. Um, but yes, the recording will be available after. The slides should also be posted on this poster session. And I will also be presenting this poster session on Thursday. So if you know any folks that maybe missed it today or couldn't make it today, I'll be back on Thursday morning too. I think it's also the same time.
Wow, look at that. Right on time. Alyssa, you're getting great feedback on the chats. And we will double check on the the PowerPoint slides and when they have to um, when they'll be posted if they aren't already. So there are a couple questions if you'd like to go. Thank you all, but just to answer some questions in the chat. Um, do you have, Alyssa, do you have versions of these tools we can use and give credit to you? And will that be available?
That's something I've thought about. I'm just a little, I have to look into it a little more because I know if I put my name on it, there's also not necessarily a way to like cite it back to me because I haven't published like any articles on it. So I haven't really published it in that way. But honestly, I'm just happy to like contribute this to folks. So I do plan on making them available on Hoova. So they'll be there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for attending the session. The next session, I believe, begins at 1. Oh, I'm in Central Time, so this is always the confusing part. At 1:15 Eastern, 12:15 Central, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you so much, Alyssa, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you, everyone.